Thank you, Madam Chair. Finally on the agenda, we have House File 1791. This bill was referred to the division by the chair of the full committee, Representative Schultz. Chair Gomez, would you like to move your bill?
I would, Madam Chair.
We have House File 1791 before us. We will have the author introduce her bill, followed by testimony and on the bill itself, and then we will hear amendments and member discussion. Just for a timestamp, we have about 50 minutes for this. We're hoping to end right at noon. Chair Gomez, please present your bill to the committee.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. House File 1791, the Housing First for Kids Local Aid, takes a big step to address an issue that impacts families and communities across the state: child homelessness. Many, if not maybe all of us are parents, all the members on here. I don't know. I was like, I don't know if Representative Petersburg has kids, but we were all parented, right? So I'm thinking about the kind of basics of parenting, which are like keeping your kids warm, making sure that they're safe from harm, making sure they have healthy food and like that they drink enough water and sleep enough, wash their hands after they eat, getting them up in the morning and getting them dressed and off to school. And, I want us as parents or as people who were parented to imagine what it's like to try to make those basic things happen if you were sleeping in a car with your kids, or if you were staying in a friend's living room and your kids were sleeping on the floor, or if you were in a shelter. Trying to figure out, like, are you going to go without utilities because you can't afford all the bills on the salary that you make? Having to decide what you're going to forego each month to keep your kids housed and fed. This is the reality for thousands of families across the state each year. And the cost of inadequate action on child homelessness, action that doesn't meet the scale of the problem, is simply too high. This cost shows up in many places in our systems, in opportunity gaps in our schools, utilization of public services, and in the human cost. I was so shocked to read this wilder data that 1/3 of those who are homeless in Minnesota during their point in time count are children under the age of 17 living with parents, which of course is disproportionate to their percentage of the population. Another thing from that wilder research that struck me was that half of adults who they surveyed who were homeless first became homeless by the time they were age 24, and 1/3 of homeless adults had been homeless with their parents when they were under age 18. So when we talk about preventing homelessness, I believe it's clear that keeping the youngest and most vulnerable in our state stably housed with their families, making sure that they do not fall off that cliff into homelessness when they're under 18 while they're still in our schools, is one of the best targeted interventions that we can do. With the Housing First for Kids Local Aid, I'm proposing that we take bold action to do for school-age kids what we have done for veterans, to come together across party lines to say that we as a society will simply not accept, in a prosperous state in the richest country that's ever existed, that children are going without a safe place to lay their heads at night. The presentation that we saw from the Department of Veterans Affairs has showed us that a housing first model and a shared effort that's targeted can make episodes of homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. Housing First is a homelessness approach that prioritizes providing permanent housing to people experiencing homelessness, or keeping people in their permanent housing as a way to prevent homelessness. Giving them a platform from which they can pursue personal goals and improve their quality of life. The Housing First approach views housing as the foundation for life. It's not one size fits all. It's tailored to the needs of the individual families. So this aid it's a local aid to counties that would help the families of up to 10,000 students each year who are in danger of experiencing homelessness. While this funding isn't going to Minnesota Housing's Homework Starts with Homes program, which you'll hear a lot about later, we modeled the approach on that program. So that's kind of why the testimony is focused on that program that's kind of rolling and that we have information about. So I just want to walk us briefly through the bill before we turn to to the testifiers. Subdivision 2 establishes the program's purpose, providing aid to local governments to help ensure that kids are not homeless. Subdivision 3 speaks to the allocation of the funds. So, the Commissioner of Revenue will allocate money to counties based on each county's percentage of students experiencing homelessness based on MDE, Minnesota Department of Education data. Subdivision 4 is sort of the meat of the bill that talks about how the funds are to be used. You can kind of read through them. The programs are targeting families with children who are in pre-K through grade 12, and either are experiencing lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, which is sort of the language from Homework Starts with Home, or if they're in overcrowded conditions in their current housing and cost burdened. So, similar to kind of the VA approach that we just heard about, sort of the kind of bedrock of this program is about providing rental assistance and support case management services that the families need. Subdivision 5 talks about how and when the allocation to the counties will be made. This is through the Department of Revenue, and they're going to calculate the county aid based on the data that they receive from MDE. The appropriation is $110 million in fiscal year 22-23. And so that's kind of that's the sort of outline of the bill. We're going to hear from a few authors, testifiers. Just want to walk you really quick through the testimony that we're going to offer. First, we're joined by Dr. Ann Maston of the University of Minnesota, and Dr. Maston's going to help ground us in the research about child homelessness and the connection to development and academic achievement. Next, we'll hear from Minnesota Housing Assistant Commissioner Ryan Baumtrog for information about Homework Starts with Home and the data that he has about sort of the scale of the problem and what our response has been. We're then going to hear from Sonia Wadena, who is the Indian Education Coordinator in Bemidji, where there's a Homework Starts with Home program site. And finally, from Dominique Perkins, who is a St. Paul Promise neighborhood parent. And with that, Madam Chair, we could go to my testifiers.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. We will start with Dr. Ann Maston. If you can please state your name and organization title for the record, please.
I'm Ann Maston. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota. And I'm honored to be here. I've been asked to share some of highlights of what we know about risk and resilience in homeless children in families and homeless youth on their own. What I wanted to begin with is the point that these families are at very high risk. The parents who have been studied who end up experiencing homelessness often have a very long history of chronic adversity dating back to their childhood. Many of you have probably heard of ACEs, the measure of adverse childhood experiences. We conduct that measurement in our state as well. But they have a history of deep poverty. We are now realizing that we see intergenerational homelessness, so that when you help parents and children, you're also preventing homelessness in another generation. We also have collected data to illustrate how high the risk level is of these parents. Here's data from a study where we asked the Quest ACE measure to parents staying in a shelter in Minnesota, and then we compared it to the national data the CDC collects, and we also compared it to our own state data from 2011 on adverse childhood experiences. And you have a handout of these slides, but I just wanted to say that you can look down here and see that in many kinds of childhood experiences, parents who are currently homeless have much higher rates of traumatic life experiences. And that's an important thing to know for what kind of services they may need. For example, their own parents have often been incarcerated at a much higher rate than other families. They've often experienced maltreatment and neglect when they were children, and they often have also experienced homelessness of their own. We also know that the children and youth who end up experiencing homelessness, whether they're with their families or not, have very high risks, very high levels of trauma experiences. They have often experienced family violence or separation from the family. They come from backgrounds of deep poverty. And what I think you can see on this list is that the children often share many of the adversities that their own parents experienced when they were children. And there are particular high-risk groups as well. We know that youth leaving foster care, making that transition, are particularly high risk for homelessness. And we know that children who experience homelessness have much more difficulty in school. They end up with many more health problems. They have mental health problems. And in many ways, their human capital for the future is affected, not just by the current crisis of homelessness, but by the history of adversity that many of these children have experienced. And of course, that has implications for our state in the future, because children who have these kind of risks and issues developing over time are going to be limited in their human capital development and in their future as part of our state and our workforce. You've already heard, I'm sure, in this committee about the Minnesota Department of Education data. As was pointed out in the first testimony about veterans, homeless students are much more at risk in terms of race and ethnicity. Black, Indigenous, and Hispanic students in Minnesota, as well as across the nation, are at much higher risk of being affected by homelessness than other students. And in some cases, this is extremely disproportional, as you can see on this graph from our own MDE data. I wanted to share these data with you. This is one of the most striking studies we've done on the risk for achievement in homeless students. These are data from a collaborative study with the Minneapolis Public Schools. They have a very high rate of homeless students over time. And these data are showing what happens in terms of reading achievement for all the kids who are tested in Minneapolis over a period of 5 years. And this is more than 26,000 students represented here. And what we're charting is their reading achievement over time. And we've divided the students into 4 groups. And the highest risk group on the chart are students who've experienced homelessness 1 or more times during this period of time that we did the study. And what is also striking is that in that district, 14% of all the students tested had experienced homelessness over the course of this 5-year period. And what you can see here is that they're at very high risk for achievement problems. They start off in the 3rd grade at around the 12th percentile on average compared to nationwide average on this test. And we've also got on this chart a solid black line, which represents the national average. That's where you would like to have your students be, close to that line or above it. And what you can see here is that they're extremely low on reading achievement, and we observe the same thing in math. And they're significantly below the group of children who are living in poverty and qualified for free meals in the district, but are not in the homeless group. And that's a very large group in the Minneapolis Public Schools. 57% of all the kids who were tested were qualified for free meals. Their achievement is also very low, but what you can see here is that the homeless students are at much higher risk than even the kids living in poverty. In math and reading is significantly below other children living in poverty. And you see up there in green, there's a dotted line for kids with reduced price meals. These children have lower income, but they're qualified for reduced price meals because they're within 185% of the poverty line. That's a smaller percentage of kids in this district, 4%. And you'll notice that they track the national norm averages on this reading test. The depth of poverty does make a difference. And then what you see at the top are students, we've called them low risk in this graph, but what that really means is that simply students who were not identified as homeless or qualified for the National School Lunch Program at any time during this 5-year period. And you see that their achievement starts off at the 75th percentile and stays very high. And what you can see in this longitudinal story is that the kids who are experiencing homelessness never close the gap. This represents the infamous achievement gap we're struggling with in Minnesota, and homeless students are very high risk for this kind of achievement disparity. Now, what about protective factors? I've been involved in studying risk and resilience in children for a long time, and we have found protective factors for students who end up with better outcomes. And these protective factors will probably be familiar to you. We know that, you know, even if children are in a shelter, if they have really effective parents, they are more successful despite all the barriers. We know that students who have attendance problems are more likely to have achievement problems, but if we can increase their attendance and we can stabilize their schooling, students do better. And we know that being able to attend high quality preschools and schools make a difference. But the problem is, for many of the homeless families that we study, is that homelessness itself undermines many of the most important protective factors for child development. Now, in terms of housing interventions, the evidence, is strongest in terms of intervention for families that are already homeless, that long-term housing subsidies make the most difference. And the most famous study is the Family Options Study, which found that housing vouchers not only reduce homelessness and food insecurity, but also decreased family separations, foster care, school mobility in the kids, also improved attendance, and also had spillover effects to the well-being of the families. In terms of preventing homelessness, which I know is the aim of this committee, the similar evidence supports housing subsidies. And in addition, some targeted efforts, for example, to prevent eviction through cash assistance or legal help and other strategies, community-based services tailored to need, which many of the programs across the state attempt to do, and targeting special populations, which may be pertinent to the first testimony we heard. The young people leaving foster care at very high risk for becoming homeless parents down the road. So that's a special population that some have urged us to focus our attention on. And I'll just close and say that I'm very thrilled to be part of a Grand Challenge project that's been funded by the University of Minnesota to help the state learn and gain evidence from studying the effects of the Homework Starts with Home project on homeless students. And we formed a research partnership with Minnesota Housing, the Department of Education, and faculty at the university. We've assembled a huge data set at MinLink, Minnesota Linking Information for Children, and we are beginning to analyze the data to determine how effective the program has been in stabilizing families and promoting achievement in children. And I'll leave it at that because you're going to hear more about this program and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Maston, for that. Just as an announcement, with the virtual platform, we have to have a firm stop at 12, and so we will end testifying at 11:45. And to Representative Petersburg, we will be doing questions during discussion. So moving on to the next, we have Ryan Baumtrog. If you can please say your name and title organization for the record, please.
Great, thanks, Chair Keeler. I'm Ryan Baumtrog, Assistant Commissioner for Policy and Community Development at Minnesota Housing. Thanks for the opportunity to testify this morning about the governor's proposed increase in the Homework Starts with Home program, which, as Representative Gomez mentioned, is the model for her legislation. I want to provide a little bit of background about Homework Starts with Home, and that starts with just a little bit of context that Minnesota Housing first received an appropriation from the legislature for the homeless and highly mobile students rental assistance pilot project back in 2013, a one-time appropriation of $2 million. And over the subsequent years, we were able to get additional one-time appropriations, but then just recently for fiscal years 2018 and 2019, the Homework Starts with Home program became part of the agency's budget, first at $2 million, then subsequently at $3.5 million. And then the governor is proposing a $1 million increase to that program for the next biennium to bring it to a total of $4.5 million. This is a program that's in collaboration with the Department of Education, the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness, as well as the philanthropic community. And as Professor Maston walked through one of her slides, talked about housing subsidies, prevention efforts, and it being community-based. And those are very much principles of the Homework Starts with Home program. So this program, why it's important, in October of 2019, more than 9,000 children were identified as homeless or highly mobile in over 1,300 schools, 307 school districts, and 78 of Minnesota's 87 counties. This is a statewide issue. It is a significant issue. And as we know, many of those students could benefit from rental assistance and other supports through the Homework Starts with Home program. Minnesota Housing currently has 8 grantees that are operating the Homework Starts with Home program across the state, in the Northwest region of the state, the West Central part of the state, Hennepin and Ramsey, as well as the Southeast part of the state, and then a few of the suburbs. These 8 grantees are estimated, once they fully enroll families, to be around 900 households. So just in context of what we're doing with the resources that have already been allocated, even at full scale, we estimate that about 900 households will be served through the resources that we've received already. Part of the Homework Starts with Home program is about community-based. Every grantee that Minnesota Housing has works with partners in the community and then identified schools. And it's through the schools connection where families get identified for the program. So it is very community-based, and I know you will hear from one of our grantees later. So I will not go into a little bit of the program delivery, but the program is meant to be community-based, working with individual families and really right-sizing the amount of housing assistance that those families need to stabilize their housing situation. We did a program evaluation of the homeless and highly mobile students program, the first one that we got in 2013, and found very similar statistics to what Dr. Mattson just walk through. One thing that I'll point out is her slides mentioned deep housing subsidies. What we found with the Homework Starts with Home program is that for about $5,000 a year or $5,500, you can stabilize a family in their home. And then through the evaluation report that we found, in as little as 2 years, families can go from experiencing homelessness to become homeowners if they are given some assistance through rent assistance to help pay their rent. It's been quite a journey throughout COVID-19 for our partners to navigate and find families. It's been harder. The needs are significant and great, but finding the families that may be more doubled up through everything that schools are doing about work, distance learning and things like that. It's been a challenge, but our grantees are navigating it throughout the state and doing as much online as they can. The population, in terms of who has been served in the last year, the annual household income, I had to look at this twice. because it's so low. The annual household income for families served through the Homework Starts with Home program is $8,000, which is about 9% of this state median income. So $8,000 is the median income for families that participate in the Homework Starts with Home program. And the average amount of assistance is $5,500. And as I mentioned earlier, families go through a coordinated effort to determine what level of housing assistance do they need. Is it prevention to help keep them in their homes, or is it rental assistance to help pay either where they're currently living or find a more suitable place to live? So with that, I know you're scrunched on time, but happy to share more later.
Thank you, Mr. Baumtrag, for that. That was extremely helpful. We are running tight on time. And so the next two testifiers, if you can just do your best to keep it under 2 minutes, because we have a lot of information to still get through. Next on the list is Sonia Wadena. Please make sure you state your name and title for the record. Thank you.
Good morning, Representative Keeler and the committee members. My name is Sonia Wadena. I'm the Indian Education Coordinator for Bemidji Area Schools in northern Minnesota. And our school district makes up roughly 23% of American Indian population. American Indians within the state make up 1% of the population, so statistically we're insignificant when it comes to data, but our challenges and experiences are not insignificant. And we recognize that here within our community, as they were writing the Homework Starts with Home grant, looking at local agencies identifying roughly 60% of the services that they're providing were for American Indians. So across the state, American Indians are disproportionately homeless, or as we prefer to say in our school, they're in transition, and in transition from one home to the next, or one situation to a new situation. So what we looked at, or as a result of the disproportionate number of American Indian children experiencing homelessness in our community, we find that it's extremely important for our Indian education program to work closely with our McKinney-Vento coordinator, as well as the local agencies such as BICAP, which is actually the fiscal agent for our Homework Starts with Home grant, to identify and meet the needs of the students, and that includes case management. We know that children do better academically and social and emotionally, which leads to a decrease in disciplinary behaviors, and they don't have to wonder where they're sleeping at night. Or we've had students, worried about their parents because they know that they don't have heat in their home. So they're sitting at school with this extra stress on them. So I feel strongly about giving people equal access to our basic needs and leveling the playing field for our students and families that need a boost or a hand up. We currently have 160 school-age children identified in our McKinney-Vento program to date, and this number is actually down due to the challenge of identifying families during the pandemic. Within our current Homework Starts with Home partnership with BICAP, which is our community action program, and with Red Lake, Bemidji Area Schools has 21 families that are benefiting from the Homework Starts with Home. Each of those families have a minimum of 2 children in their home, so that's 42. If we just go with 2 per family, that's 42 children that are impacted by this grant. Again, it's the housing finance piece that goes with that, and the case management to support them to move off of the subsidy. As a result of those 21 families, 15 of those families enrolled in the program last year and are in stable housing and no longer qualify as under McKinney-Vento. Of those 15 families, they're adequately housed and they feel confident in that. And we're hopeful that they can maintain that stability for their students. We have an additional 5 families that have been housed this year under that program, and we have 1 family that is still awaiting housing. So this resource has helped stabilize many youth in our district, and they can now focus again on their education. The funding has also prevented enrollment movement from within our school or moving to other neighboring schools or even out of state. It's allowed the children to remain in their home school in a stable setting, which will eliminate or has eliminated that typical 4 to 6 months of academic loss. So we find this to be beneficial, and I encourage your support, continued support of this, because these children are our future.
Thank you, Ms. Wadena. I have to say to you, I appreciate you and your work. Thank you. Next, we have Dominique Perkins. If you can make sure that we're on a time crunch, so try to keep it under 2 minutes. Please state your name and organization title for the record, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and community members, or committee members, I'm sorry. My name is Dominique Perkins, and this is my testimony. Speak to me. Speak to me. Speak. A young mother doing everything that I can, working 2 and 3 jobs, but still the odds are at hand. I get knocked at the door. My landlord let our house get foreclosed. The place me and my children have grown, they are not telling us we now have to go. I drop my head down to the floor. There is no hope. My mind is everywhere. How do I manage to cope? We have been homeless before. That's a place that no one wants to know. That's a place where no one wants to go. That's a place where we feel downright low. I have to give up everything, all our memories and dreams. We take what we can and leave the rest in between. I felt like I was losing my mind. I'm thankful to God that I had strong people by my side. I know that being strong is how I survive. So I went into a shelter. I had to swallow my pride. This stripped my children away from their structure, from their comfort, and how to deal with one another. Their behaviors change, their attitudes change. They were failing in school. This added more stress to my pain. The school reached out and offered me support. I just wanted to be self-sufficient. I found out I was not by myself. With programs that are out here to help families in need, it gives a struggling family a chance to believe. It gives a single mother and a father a chance to achieve, making our dreams possible and overcoming many obstacles. Being able to afford housing makes a big difference. I am a better support to my children, and I can provide for a living. Helping families with housing allows families to prosper and children to enhance. It gives a family an opportunity to not depend on anyone, but to lend a helping hand. Now I am working on owning my own business and creating a foundation. My children have structure, and they're working on their education. These programs are important to creating a better society. That is why I'm here, and I thank you all entirely. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ms. Perkins. There's been a lot of stories and testifiers that we have heard, and that was extremely moving. Thank you for sharing that with us. We are going to move quickly to, we have 2 public testifiers that we're going to be able to get to today just to stay on track with time. Any of the other public testifiers that we were not able to get to, if you can please submit written testimony, we will get that out to our committee. So we are going to move to Commissioner Irene Fernando, just for the sake of time. Again, if we can keep it brief, preferably under 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Thanks to Dominique for your powerful words. My name is Irene Fernando, Hennepin County Commissioner. Over the past year, I have personally observed youth and family homelessness grow dramatically in Hennepin. As a local elected, I partner with staff, community, and colleagues in a race against time to expand shelter capacity before the cold Minnesota winter. On the heels of that, and in my role as the Vice Chair of Association of Minnesota Counties Economic Development, Workforce, and Housing Committee, I'm incredibly appreciative of this bill, which recognizes homelessness as an issue in every county. The issue of homelessness does not occur in a vacuum of the metro. My commissioner colleagues across the state have expressed concern about the growing number of individuals and families experiencing homelessness in their counties. Homelessness and housing instability may take different forms across the state. In some instances, people may be staying in their cars or on couches of friends and loved ones in order to get a roof over their heads. Some migrate to the metro where resources may be more readily available. But in these instances, people and families are faced with the difficult reality that in order to seek a safe place to lay their heads at night, they must leave the support and connections of their home communities. As such, AMC has identified increasing resources for housing security and affordability as a statewide legislative priority this year. We support direct investments in prevention programs to address the growing crisis of homelessness across the state, such as rental assistance and foreclosure prevention. I know in previous committee hearings, members have heard from fellow county commissioners from St. Louis County, Olmsted, and even a commissioner who operates his own shelter in Beltrami. Homelessness is a Minnesota problem and it requires a Minnesota solution. Every single person in our communities deserves and has earned the right for a safe, dignified, and reliable place to lay their heads each night. And this bill takes a big step towards addressing the poverty and housing insecurity that plagues so many of our state's children and families. In closing, thanks to the committee for your consideration, and special thanks to you, Representative Gomez, for your strong leadership. We look forward as Hennepin and as AMC to working with you directly to ensure that needs are met across the state with the necessary flexibility for each unique county. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fernando. Next, we will move to Laura Birnbaum. Again, just for time, state your name, title, and try to keep it under 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Laura Birnbaum and I work for St. Louis County Public Health and Human Services, supervising our housing and homelessness programs team. And I'm pleased and grateful to be with you this morning. Homelessness and housing instability continues to be a barrier with ever-shifting challenges for families and unaccompanied youth in Greater Minnesota. As of yesterday, in Duluth alone, 1,250 households on our coordinated entry system are on our coordinated entry system priority list. Our coordinated entry system is intended to match households experiencing homelessness with housing that meets their needs. Of these, 397 households have children, with 25 individuals being pregnant at the time of their assessment. An additional 29 households were pregnant also at the time of their assessment with no other children in the household. To illustrate that this is not just a Duluth issue, our largest city, in northern St. Louis County, 100 households are currently on our priority list. 22 of those households have children, with one of them pregnant at assessment. An additional 7 households were also pregnant at the time of assessment with no other children in the household. So this data is significant in itself, knowing that our priority lists do not capture every household that is experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness in our communities. We know that students may not report homelessness due to the stigma it carries and not wanting to be outed to their peers. We also know that parents may have fears of children being removed if they ask for help, all leading to the likelihood that the need is far underreported. The impact of youth and family homelessness is showing up in many places, including but not limited to truancy action projects, our crisis nursery, and supervised visitation programs. The issues that are presented here are rooted in experiencing homelessness and housing instability, often coupled with unmet mental and chemical health needs. In preparation for my time with you today, I reached out to many of our partner organizations across St. Louis County to hear from them directly. We have wonderful partners who are dedicated to the work and the youth and families that they serve. I felt it was really important for you to hear their perspectives as well, lifting up the voices of youth and families experiencing homelessness or at risk. These partners include Lutheran Social Services, Lifehouse, CHUM, specifically the Steve O'Neill Apartments, which is permanent supportive housing in Duluth, AEOA, the Loaves and Fishes community, school social workers serving families in transition, and St. Louis County children mental health workers, all who provide a continuum of services and supports including street outreach, supportive housing, emergency shelter, case management, and housing navigation support. I know we're on a time crunch, so I submitted this in writing as well, so you can see a much more detailed picture of some of the data and examples and illustrations. But what I would really like to highlight is, yes, we are seeing more families and unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness across our county, but more specifically, we're seeing youth who are experiencing homelessness who are parents themselves and parenting multiple children. This creates significant barriers due to the lack of units that are adequate for larger families, and this is true throughout our communities. In short, the need for House File 1791, if it is to become a bill, is in St. Louis County is clear and with serious consequence. I'm excited about the potential that it has to become a bill, and I'm confident that the impact would be significant for families and youth facing homelessness due to our strong, dedicated, and innovative partner agencies and organizations. We have these already in place through various programs and grant
Ms.
work.
Bermhall, sorry, we need to move on. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, and I know that you said you submitted something in writing. We will be sure to look over that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Members, we have a DE amendment labeled House File 1791 DE1. Who is offering this amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, if it's okay, Madam Chair, I spoke to the other Madam Chair this morning, and what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is I will just speak to this for a minute, and then I will withdraw. I won't offer the amendment. I know I spoke to the chair, and I know that she does not want to take the amendment today, but we will work on it moving forward. And so, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Representative Gomez for the bill. You know, we talked early on about identifying those populations where it's important to have the biggest impact, and we both agreed that that includes our kids particularly. And to one of the testifiers, I mean, we talked about the impact on the disparities in education outcomes and all of these things. And so I really appreciate the goal of this bill. And my concern with voting for the bill in its current form is that there's still so much we don't know. And I forwarded some bill language to Representative Gomez as well this morning to sort of get to the heart of that. But I'm concerned about starting a new, relatively expensive program in perpetuity without more information. And so the DE amendment actually takes Representative Gomez's language verbatim. I don't change that language. All we do is turn it into a pilot program for the next 2 years with a study at the end. And we cut back the funding just a little bit because of the cost of the program. And I just think it's really critical. While certainly I support the investment, I'm concerned about starting that program in perpetuity without a report to the legislature, without knowing the success of what we're doing. So that was the intent behind the DE amendment, but I will withdraw that. And I would just ask, I just have one question about the bill, if I may quickly. We've talked about this on other bills as well that have come before the committee, and we've supported some legislation to help this. But one of the things this bill does is it says targeting of unaccompanied youth in need of an alternative residential setting. And I'm wondering if you can, if Representative Gomez or somebody else on the call could talk to that a little bit. I'm wondering, clearly there are services available, but I'm wondering, particularly when it comes to unaccompanied youth, how the system is sort of designed to function when it comes to youth. Clearly, we have a foster system in the state, but are there ages at which we don't push kids back into the foster system and we support them on their own right? How does that function in practicality?
Okay, first, thank you, Representative New Brindley. I want to say I appreciate our committee and our active movement to work together. I just need to make the announcement that Representative New Brindley withdraws the DE amendment that we have before us in House File 1791. Now moving to the question, Chair Gomez, did you want to respond? Again, being mindful of how much time we have left.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I would ask Mr. Grumdahl or Commissioner Bontrog to speak to Representative New Brindley's question, if that's possible.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Madam Chair and Representative Gomez and Representative New Brindley, I think that question is a one that makes a lot of sense in this context and requires a pretty deep dive. So it's hard to answer succinctly. I think the short version is that, especially for older minors and for people, for youth over the age 18 and for older minors, often foster care based solutions are not going to end up being the fastest or best option. And so what's really been created in a number of communities across the state is a partnership between homeless youth serving organizations and local child welfare agencies to determine kind of what's available or what's possible. That is a space that frankly could also use a lot of reinforcement and support, because often there aren't options available for those two entities, the homeless youth service community and the child welfare agency, to meaningfully draw from an option that's really youth centered and able to respond to that individual youth's housing situation and need. And so there's a pilot program that the Interagency Council on Homelessness and DHS stood up with Hennepin County called Minor Connect, that was really focused exactly on that particular challenge of trying to find the right kind of housing solution for older minors. And so happy to do a deeper dive into just some of what that experience showed. I think what it really showed is that a child welfare solution or a homeless youth solution by themselves aren't as strong or as effective as having the two entities really partner together. But there's very rarely been the right kind of resources or support for that kind of partnership to occur. Minor Connect is kind of an exception in that way. And so, so the short answer is often there's not a great solution that's available in either system for those older minor youth right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative New Brindley. Representative Petersburg, I appreciate your patience. We've tried to get through a lot of information very quickly. We do need to do roll call in 1 minute. So can you ask your question or statement? And I think it's noted that we need to have a further conversation around this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the inquiry of Chair Gomez, I have a blended family of 8 children, 11 grandchildren, and 1 grandchild that's distance learning with me for a year. So I understand that part. My question is also around Representative New Brindley's concern about this program without any kind of analysis or reporting back. And I'm real concerned that we are putting together a program in which we are not going to know whether or not we're working. As we heard about the Veterans Affair, they started in 2014, and they're still making changes to the program. And so without that kind of direction and backup and follow-up, I'm concerned that we may be putting forth a program that may not be very successful and just kind of running around in circles. And so that's my concern. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Petersburg. Chair Gomez, do you want to have a quick response? And then we do need to go to roll call.
I just would say that I'm very open to adding reporting mechanisms. So I'm going to be in touch with you guys about this. So thank you so much. Well, we should probably just go to the vote. I appreciate the great conversation today.
Hearing no further discussion, Chair Gomez will renew her motion that House File 1791 be returned to the full committee. Will the legislative assistant take the roll?
Chair Gomez.
Aye.
Chair Gomez, aye. Keeler.
Aye.
Keeler, aye. New Brindley.
No.
New Brindley, nay. Davids.
No.
Davids, nay. Heinrich.
No.
Heinrich, nay. Hollins.
Aye.
Hollins, aye. Hornstein.
Aye.
Hornstein, aye. Howard.
Aye.
Howard, aye. Cagle.
Aye.
Cagle, aye. Petersburg.
No.
Petersburg, nay. Ryer.
Aye.
Ryer, aye. There are 7 ayes and 4 nays.
With that, the motion passes and House File 1791 is referred to the full committee.